To Canberra for the National Press Club address. Here is the now former leader of the Greens, Christine Milne.
And I begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And in doing so, I want to begin by condemning in the strongest possible terms the Prime Minister's decision last year to slash more than $500 million from Aboriginal programs, and his decision to back Western Australian Premier Colin Barnett in closing remote communities in Western Australia, claiming that they are a lifestyle choice. This funding must be restored in this year's budget. After so long in politics, working for the apology, working towards reconciliation, recognition in the Constitution, it's very clear to me, if we are genuine about reconciliation, if we are genuine about closing the gap and respecting Aboriginal connection to country, then Australia's history of forced dispossession must not be repeated. National stories only mean something if they are backed by consistent philosophical action. That is what it will take to get the recognition that we need in the Constitution for Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Now, this whole episode has been an example of why you need a vision before you deliver a budget. The budget, more than anything else a government delivers, is a mirror into the values that they hold. Budgets offer insight into both the priorities and the prejudices of the writers. If you want to know what people and governments value, look how they raise and spend money. If you want to know why they raise and spend money, then you have to know what the big picture is, where that money is supposed to be allocated, what it's supposed to be delivering. What do we want Australia to be like in 2050, for example? And that's what's completely lacking in the Abbott government. It has been up until now, and it almost certainly will be in the budget that's coming. Money and market are their drivers, and it's almost as if they think that just pursuing money and the market will of itself deliver public policy outcomes. But I can tell you, after all these years, it's pretty obvious to everybody that you won't deliver a 21st century low-carbon economy. You won't deliver a safe climate, a futuristic, efficient public transport system with light rail, freight and high-speed connections, unless you have a multi-decade plan. You won't deliver the kind of happy, confident society that Australia wants to be unless you have a multi-decade plan. Handing nations over to the vagaries of the market has proven disastrous. And that's why it's absolutely wonderful to be here today at this moment in time in Australia, having just stepped down as leader of the Australian Greens and in the lead up to the Abbott government's second budget. Because I know that we are seeing here in Australia what is being seen around the world and will be demonstrated in the British election being held today, and that is we are witnessing the death throes of neoliberal economics. The future is now full of possibility and there's no going back. What a great place to be in determining public policy in Australia. Over 3 decades of my life as an environmental activist and parliamentarian, essentially my life has been bookended by the fundamentally flawed and extreme ideological experiment that has been neoliberalism. But it is also that has led me to be part of the emergence and growth of green politics as a response to it both here and around the world. The era of the environment with its precious ecosystems as dispensable fodder for economic growth is over. As I leave, the time is now ripe for the great green team, here led by the new leadership team of Richard Di Natale, Scott Ludlam, Larissa Waters in the Australian Parliament, the leadership that's being offered in other countries around the world to drive and implement the raft of policies and ideas that people want. People sense that the values like community, and public interest that they've been forced to suppress for so long, made to feel as if they are not worthy aspirations, people are now sensing they feel like they've got a chance of re-emerging. And I can tell you, revolutions occur not when people are totally ground down. They occur when people start to believe that things can be better. And that's where we are right now. As a philosophy, neoliberalism has as its heart the market, which its adherents think should be free from interference from government. Economic growth is paramount. Corporations and their agents need to be free to pursue whatever gives them an economic advantage. As a consequence, domestic and global markets must be free to operate with little or no government constraint or regulation. The hallmarks of neoliberalism are free trade, deregulation, privatisation, small government and public spending cuts. And I can tell you the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the extreme expression, the last death throes of neoliberalism, and we better make sure that we prevent it actually coming to fruition. The ideal market-driven world was supposed to solve all of the social and economic problems we have with the trickle-down effect. How many times are we told, just give it to the big end of town, give it to the market, and everybody else will benefit? But by maximising self-interest over the community interest or the common good, everyone was supposed to be better off. What a spectacular failure it has been. A failure environmentally, socially and economically, such that only a radical reassertion of government into decision-making gives us any real hope. As Sir Nicholas Stern said in 2006, global warming is the greatest market failure of all time, and it continues to be, with the science getting worse. We are living in Australia right now, in the whole planet, in a climate emergency. It is a matter of fact, not of opinion. Ice sheets are melting, sea levels are rising, extreme weather events are intensifying, coral reefs are dying, 1 in 6 species are headed to extinction. And yet the market sees the earth as having an infinite capacity to provide resources and life-supporting clean air, clean water, uncontaminated soil, and an infinite capacity to absorb wastes and into its rivers, oceans and atmosphere. Now, this idea that the very home we live on, our physical reality, is an externality, shows you just how flawed this is, and it's led to the World Economic Forum in 2014 identifying food, water, climate and extreme weather as 4 of the top 10 risks. That is where we are. The rest of the risks are associated with income disparity, fiscal failure, unemployment, underemployment and social instability. Even the IMF is now saying that progressive taxation should be more of a focus than regressive sales tax, but no one here in Canberra is listening to that, where insulating the rich has been the focus. Even after the global financial crisis, where failure to regulate the market led to the most massive bailout of all time, it's back to business as usual. Regulating the financial services industry has been a real struggle and is still not where it needs to be. Greed has thrived as every day those who argue that taxes, bailouts, regulations and subsidies are unwarranted restraints on market freedom simultaneously put their own hands out for all the corporate welfare they can muster. Rescue packages for the native forest loggers, regulation to stop protesters, but deregulation to facilitate mines and coal seam gas. Cut the renewable energy target for aluminium smelters, coal-fired generators, abolish the mining tax, pollute for free, keep the fuel tax credit for the big miners, keep on with the subsidies for oil and gas exploration, avoid any penalties or crack down on tax avoidance. You can guarantee in this year's budget, when the light is shone on the 55 millionaires in Australia who right now pay no tax, or the 700 richest private companies that want their affairs to remain a secret, or the big miners and polluters and their use of tax havens, or the immunity from prosecution from the wealthy, the chorus will be, look over there, the GST. Look over there. Don't look at us. Look over there. The community can pay more with the GST. Interestingly, the wave of global innovation that was supposed to result after the last 30 years of neoliberal economic policy, if it has emerged, has done so in spite of neoliberal policy and small government, not because of it. If you look at Australia's largest solar farm, for example, it's a result of the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Look to the CSIRO. Fantastic innovation. That has not come from small government. That has come from government funding science. Any innovation that threatens those who profit from the old economy, from environmental and social exploitation, are actively opposed. Research and development is slashed. Education funding is denied for Gonski, for example. Universities have their funding slashed. Effective programs, social programs, environmental programs are closed down or rendered ineffective. And all that was done with great fanfare with the Abbott government's first budget. In fact, the one good thing I can say about the 2014 budget was that it was so transparently extreme, so obviously the naked implementation of the market, right down to the cigar smoking of the Treasurer and the Finance Minister, or the list of 75 asks from the Institute of Public Affairs that no one could miss, no one in the whole country could miss just how unjust it was, how much it made life harder for people and how dismissive of the environment. Now, the Prime Minister has no nuancing or disguise, no consultation with anyone who might know anything about education or health or the environment. He imposed the agenda of the mates who'd put him there, who had been salivating during 2 terms of opposition, couldn't wait till they get there, and they went for it. Hit pensions, unemployed, students, single parents, cut superannuation entitlements for low-income earners, call it a budgetary emergency, tell people it's in their best interests to suffer and just plain lie. That's what they did last year. The community rallied. The Australian Greens stood with people in every capital city and beyond and protested against this madness, this slashing and smashing of lives and values. Clearly we stood up and said, we are people, not economic units. We live in a society, not an economy. We care about one another, our community, our environment, not just bank accounts. And it's great joy, I can say, that after the last 12 months, both Prime Minister Abbott and neoliberal economics have been discredited at the same time. The old order hasn't gone down without a fight, though, and they try to blame the Senate. They call it obstructionist and argue that the Australian Greens should use our power to negotiate a compromise on these abhorrent policies. But 1 year on, I'm really proud to say that the Greens used our power in unwavering opposition and forced the government to back down on the pension indexation, on university deregulation, on Medicare co-payments. We've saved the Climate Change Authority, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Renewable Energy Agency, and if the ALP had held the line on the renewable energy target, we could have forced them into a back down on that as well. Meanwhile, there were senators who were lauded by the neoliberal echo chamber, in the Murdoch press in particular, for doing the deals, for throwing in their lot with the Abbott government, for boosting mining profits by abolishing the mining tax, allowing the big polluters to pollute for free, handing them $2.5 billion of taxpayer funds under direct action, abolished low-income superannuation, took $700 million out of the Renewable Energy Agency, and if the common good is the benchmark, then lauding those senators for those deals might have been a resounding media spectacle, but it was an utter national policy failure. So what comes next? Will the Prime Minister be able to rescue himself with a dull budget on the pretext of learning from his mistakes? Will Abbott's style of neoliberal light cut it this year? Well, I say not at all, because as Einstein said, you don't solve problems with the same mentality that created them. And let me tell you, the same mentality governing for the big end of town remains. Rather than governing for the people that elected it, the government treats the market as its primary constituent, demanding Australians should shoulder greater and greater pressures and make more sacrifices. But it's all in vain because, as I say, a revolution is underway. In his seminal work on the structure of scientific theory, Thomas Kuhn gives insight into why that's so. He was the scientist who brought about the much-used term paradigm shift. But he challenged the notion of steady cumulative progress and saw discontinuities and revolutionary phases leading to conceptual breakthroughs, which settled down to become the new norm. The proliferation of competing articulations, the willingness to try anything, the expression of explicit discontent, the recourse to philosophy and to debate over fundamentals, all these are symptoms of a transition from normal to extraordinary research. And that's what's happening now in the broader community. People are expressing discontent. In the 50s, the average American CEO was paid 25 times that of an employee, a pay ratio that is now 200 times. And that trend's echoed around the world, with all of the global wealth being owned by the 1%. Just 80 people own the same amount as 3.5 billion others. And that is the poorest 50% of the global population. The free market espoused by Reagan and Thatcher and the Abbott government have enabled the powerful to capture and concentrate wealth at obscene levels, leaving ordinary people voiceless, their interests ignored, their environment destroyed. So elevating markets and trusting business to regulate themselves resulted in the global financial crisis, but in scrambling to deal with it, much of the world has doubled down on the very policies that caused it. Governments have to change, and that's where we are now. Anomalies in neoliberal economic outcomes are rife. People see the inconsistencies and failure to deliver, and they want something different. And that's why I've said in the last 24 hours that the Greens are set to come into our own. We have been challenging the fundamentals of neoliberal economics from the beginning of our party. We put people and communities and the place we call home, our planet, before the market and individual self-interest. And I'm leaving a party that will continue to do that in the federal parliament, in state and territory parliaments and right around the world. We say yes to sustaining life on our planet, yes to healthy rivers and oceans and forests and wetlands and reefs, yes to regulations and laws that make it happen, and no to reducing everything to a dollar value of ecosystem services or the stupidity of offsets. And in the last week you would have heard 262 koalas are to be relocated in order to make way for the Shenhua coal mine with the clearing of 847 hectares of their habitat. This is pure stupidity. We say yes to public ownership and no to endless privatisation of essential services like health, education, public transport, energy transmission and affordable housing to people. We say yes to government intervention in the market by legislation and regulation in the public interest. And this government's pursuit of small government, another of the anomalies of so-called neoliberal economics, they say small government and then they dole out $3 billion a year to the world's most profitable mining companies in their fuel tax credits. So I'm leaving some unfinished business to my colleagues who are joining me here today. In the climate space alone, we can shut down coal-fired generators now by regulation and set hard and fast limits to greenhouse gas pollution. We can regulate new standards for vehicle fuel efficiency. We can make new rules, new legislation for the national electricity market. We can and should save the RET. We can end the destruction of the environment by protecting farmland and water and banning fracking and coal seam gas, tight gas or shale gas. We can legislate to stop the logging of native forests and exploitation of fisheries by rapacious trawlers, and we could do all those things within the next few months. We say yes to Australia being able to determine what's in our own best interests and not handing that over to multinational corporations as in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and others of these free trade agreements, because they are not fair trade agreements. This is the biggest assault on our national sovereignty And Greens are leading the charge in Australia to oppose that assault on our national sovereignty. And because we support the common good and the public interest, the need to reduce income inequality and wealth inequality is central. So we support progressive taxation and revenue-raising measures that strengthen the social or environmental fabric of our society. And that's what taxes can do. Instead of paying polluters as indirect action, what was wrong with giving low-income earners a tax break with the rise in the tax-free threshold while making the big polluters pay? It made absolute sense. So I'm excited. Humanity is on the cusp of righting itself. The dominant paradigm is under question. People are willing to try new things at a time when global warming and wealth inequality demand a transformation. We need a wave of social and technical and economic innovation that will touch every person, community, institution and nation on earth. It's a call out to everyone to embrace this challenge and bring to it the greatest resource of this century, which is imagination. The average age of the team who put a man on the moon mission itself, was 28. They did what everyone thought was impossible and put a man on the moon in the decade. That's the challenge we have now in global warming. In my 25 years in politics, the one lesson that I would say that I have learned and I would pass on to my team, and that is you have to do the work in preparation for the time when you have the window of opportunity to act. You can never know when that is, but the first person with a good strategy and well-researched plan on the table when a crisis or opportunity arises often succeeds. Not often necessarily about the numbers, it's about knowing what to do and having the plan. It was my experience in Tasmania with gay law reform, with gun law reform after the Port Arthur massacre, in the balance of power with the Gillard government when the Greens achieved the Clean Energy Package and Denticare and included the Tasmanian forests in the World Heritage Area, rounding off 30 years of campaigning for those forests. The Greens have that philosophy, commitment and track record of being able to act when the opportunity arises. And as neoliberalism disintegrates and the world starts to reel from the disastrous impacts of warming heading to 4 degrees, the world will need bright, engaged, visionary teams of people coming from a values base of community and environment. And that's why I say the Greens are it, and they are set to deliver on that in 2016. People are already showing that they're willing to do new things. People have started to vote for what they believe in instead of the way that it's always been done. Voting with your values is a way of re-engaging with the community, especially young people who are tired of neoliberal and neoliberal light and who want to secure their future physically with employment and a whole of society and government plan to address these overwhelming trends. The latest polls show 1 in 4 voters have abandoned the old parties and their neoliberal tendencies, and I can tell you the Greens are out there talking to those people. And I can't tell you how good it feels to have gone out hard for 25 years for justice, for the environment, for community, to have held the line against the market is God philosophy long enough through thick and thin to now see the Greens develop the policies and culture at a local, state, national and global level, such that in at least 70 countries in the world, the alternative philosophy to neoliberal economics is ready to roll, and I'm particularly proud that all that started in Tasmania, my home state, many years ago with the establishment of the United Tasmania Group. So many people have contributed to get us to this point, and I want to thank them all, and I want to start with the activists who've been prepared to put their bodies and their freedom and well-being on the line from the Lake Pedder campaign right through to now. There are too many campaigns to mention, but many of you are in this room as we speak, from, I said, Lake Pedder to the Franklin, to Farmhouse Creek, to Talangi today. We've had it with the Tamar Valley, Wesley Vale campaign, Tamar Valley Pulp Mill. We've had it with the campaign for the reef, the campaigns against coal seam gas. We've had it with everything from Jabiluka, James Price Point, you name it, right around the country, and they're out there today. And I say thank you to those activists who've had the courage to stand up. When the laws do not deliver what the community needs, people have been prepared to stand up. But I say to them that without your courage, we the Greens would not be where we are, but we need to keep it up to enable the Greens to be the dominant political and social influence of this century. I also say to those activists, Green politics is environmental and social activism. It is Green MPs who are taking the cause to where the decisions are made. Green MPs are the people who share your passion and values. They're the ones who have a coherent philosophy and voting record and will not sell you out. Backing neoliberalism or neoliberalism light won't drive the transformation you know the natural world needs and society requires. You know how urgent the action is. Don't let the future down by advocating a vote for a party or individual who doesn't share your values. Surely, to do that is what constitutes a wasted vote. To my voters and supporters in Tasmania, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent you and for backing the vision for a clean, green and clever Tasmania, a place renowned for its clean air, clean water, uncontaminated soil, loved globally and appreciated for its wilderness and creativity that inspires an understanding that it is a place of outstanding universal value for humankind. I couldn't be prouder of the role that the Greens have played, from doubling the size of the World Heritage Area through to the inclusion of the forests and the ongoing campaign to protect it, to know that it is there for the future. We've still got more work to do in Tasmania, but we're brilliantly placed. In a world that is focusing on the Southern Ocean, the science, we are well placed to change our economy to be based on that. I'm stepping down as leader because it's time I had to make a decision as to whether or not to stand again for election in 2016. And I couldn't, in my heart of hearts, promise to represent you in Tasmania for another term. We've always been honest with each other, and I don't intend to mislead you now. It is time for generational change and for new energy as to the possibilities for our state and nation, and they're immense. To the members of the Australian Greens around the country and to my parliamentary colleagues, thank you for the privilege of leading this great party and for everything that you do. It is a humbling experience to carry the hopes of people for a more caring society and a life-sustaining planet on my shoulders, and that of my parliamentary team and my staff in Hobart and in Canberra. Over the past 3 years, we have together not only strengthened our national party and our global party, but we've built a strong national culture, an exciting direct action engagement strategy with the community, which has delivered for us in state elections, and we have a wonderful depth of talent in our parliamentary team, all ready to take off, and that will enable the Greens to bring it home for the people and the planet in the federal election next year. To my family, my partner Gary, my sons Thomas and James, my mother June, who at 91 will be watching with my extended family in Tasmania today, thank you for believing it's possible to change the world and for the support you've given me for so long, for the sacrifices you've made to enable us all together to do this. I couldn't have done it without you. In conclusion, Henry David Thoreau's Walden has sustained me over the years, and it inspires me now as I open up to the possibilities of the next phase of my life. And I hope it will inspire the Green team as they enjoy this moment in Australian politics, when the old neoliberal order is crumbling and what replaces it is being actively imagined in order to give our planet and people a safe climate and future. And I quote, "The surface of the earth is soft and impressible by the feet of men, and so with the paths which the mind travels. How worn and dusty then must be the highways of the world, how deep the ruts of tradition and conformity. I didn't wish to take a cavern passage, but rather to go before the mast and on the deck of the world, for there I could best see the moonlight amid the mountains. I do not wish to go below now. The cabin passage is not for me or the Greens. It hasn't been the passage for Adam and I over the last few years, and it won't be the passage for my parliamentary colleagues. I'm confident that we'll continue to enjoy the moonlight and the mountains from before the mast. Thank you very much.